So yeah, as I say, it's a topic which is, I suppose, based upon some feedback generally that we're hearing about or getting from conversations that we have in the space with our existing client base, but also people who we speak to on a regular basis as well. So hopefully, it'll be something over the next 45 minutes or so that you can take away and give you some steps to improve upon certain aspects of digital sustainability and longevity as well. So I guess a quick note on the agenda for today. Those of you who are new here, we'll go through some quick intros shortly, but it'd be great if you wouldn't mind staying on mute for the time being, just so there's no background noise or feedback or anything like that. But yeah, please feel free to use the chat pane for questions. And my colleague Olivia will be dropping in a few links and things in there as well, so look out for those. We'll of course go through the main topic of today, which is all around website sustainability, longevity, a few things to think about and some things you can do as well to, I suppose, make your investment in digital go a little bit further. We'll have some time towards the end, as I say, for a Q&A as well. So if anyone's got any questions, myself or one of the Prodo team, Liv, Joe, we'll do our best to help as well. So yeah, we'll get started. My name's Jacob. I'm head of sales here at Prodo. So my role essentially is to connect with, consult with, and explore digital transformation opportunities with housing associations who are looking to transform in some way. I suppose with the ultimate goal of aligning some of Prodo's products and services and consultancy around helping to sort of alleviate some of those challenges. I started coming up to 5 years ago, working with exclusively a bunch of Prodo's housing customers. So that got me quite familiar with the sector. So I like to think that I'm quite familiar with some of the challenges which you guys have. We're of course host to the Housing Hive here at Prodo. It's something we set up in lockdown 1 initially just to make sure everyone was okay, share some ideas of sort of how people were navigating through the pandemic. But yeah, as an agency, we specialize in the housing space. We have done for 20 years or so now, but now we've got that sort of laser focus within that space, enabling us to, I suppose, continually innovate for our customers and people who are looking to bring on board as well. We do have a channel shift book called Shift as well. Hopefully some of you have got it already, but if you haven't, we'll pop a link in for you to download the ebook. That is essentially some of our learnings from numerous projects in digital over the years with housing associations, but also over 250 contributors as well from the sector, sort of giving their thoughts and insights in terms of what's gone well. And the output is essentially a practical guide, which you can hopefully make use of. And we're also the minds behind Franklin and the Frank app, which is a new launch for us this year. 2 SaaS-based products specific for housing associations looking to, I guess, enhance customer experience in some ways, but also sort of realise some internal efficiency savings with integrations and those sorts of things too. Did you want to say a quick hello, Liv? I know you're going to be chatting to me a little bit on this one as well.
Yeah, hi, I'm Liv. I'm a senior account manager here at Prodo. I've been here around a year and a bit, but I also worked here about 7 years ago as well. So it's great to see you all today.
So good you had to come back. We do run multiple events and sort of videos, and we record them all as well. So we have a video hub with all of the past Housing Hives recorded and uploaded onto there. So I would have thought there's some sort of topic on there which we've covered that will be of interest to you guys as well. So if you need to jump off today or like to revisit anything from today, we'll follow up with a link to it. But there's also a bunch of videos on there with different topics for you guys to I suppose watch back and listen to as well. But we'll get onto today's session specifically then, which is all around website sustainability and longevity, what you can do to plan ahead to help your investments into digital go further and actually reduce your carbon output somewhat as well. Obviously, the main sort of net zero carbon in the housing is going to be a hell of a lot to do with the actual properties themselves and efficiencies around that. But there are a few things you can think about from a digital point of view, which can sort of help support that in some ways as well. So we'll cover some bits within there as well. But yeah, I guess why now? All of our topics that we cover, as I said at the very start, is basically driven by trends and I suppose themes of what we're hearing in the sector with our client base and people who we liaise with regularly at any one particular time. We're hearing more now than ever that investments into digital-based products and services and sort of everything that surrounds that really need to be showing returns quickly and also need to be quite long-lasting as well in terms of that upfront investment lasting quite a long time. So that's the reason for today, and that's the goal of today's topic. And yeah, hopefully we'll give you something to take away from. But yeah, I suppose to begin with, as we're all aware, the housing sector is under considerable pressure from all different angles at the moment, and that seems to be growing from different perspectives as time moves on. As digital transformation gains more momentum in the sector, you're inevitably going to grow your sets of personal data on customers in order to provide services to them going forwards. But with that comes, I suppose, increased cybersecurity risks as well, as that side of digital unfortunately grows along with it. We're all aware, as I say, of the target for net zero carbon is 2050. Obviously, the well-documented and very, very publicly discussed cost of living crisis, and obviously the income and rent caps for you guys as well as continued work on the social housing white paper in terms of output around generally being more transparent with customers, hearing customer feedback and sort of actioning that as well. And of course, the ongoing demand for housing generally overall. So now feels like quite a good time to discuss this sort of topic. So that's the reason for today, I suppose. But having the client base that we do and conversations with other housing associations weekly, as well as, I guess, the Q&A sort of side of the Housing Hive that we have every month, we're hearing consistently that budgets are really being scrutinised now as much as they've ever been before, but they're sort of in tandem. There's still that constant drive for enhanced customer experience to meet today's expectations, customer expectations, and internal efficiencies improvements as well for cost-saving exercises through channel shift, through digital transformation, sort of automation of processes as well. And often channel shift start from our point of view with an optimized website to guide customers to self-service outcomes and helpful resources with the goal of enabling them to find answers to their inquiries or even book appointments without having to reach out directly, specifically at a time and a place that suits them. Usually these platforms will be geared towards probably guiding someone to some sort of app, self-service portal, or other means of some sort of digital engagement. So they need to be effective. And when you're going for a high quality solution, obviously that carries a certain level of investment with it as well, rather than just a very sort of cheap offer, which maybe will do a job, but is lacking in certain areas. So when you are investing considerable figures into a website project, you want it to be something which will perform for you quite quickly, create a return for you for years to come, rather than having to redo it every 12 months. After all of the internal discovery that you would have been through, business case creation, sign off, bidding for budgets and sort of allocating budgets to those things as well internally, the procurement process itself, which we're very, very familiar with, being quite in depth at times, contracting phase, working with the supplier to deliver the right solution and sort of having it launched. Ideally, this isn't something you want to be doing annually or even every couple of years. It's something you want to be putting a lot of time and effort in, having the result last for you over a long period of time. With the solution being something which is extendable, updatable, and sort of able to be tailored to what your needs are, suit your needs as the requirements inevitably, I suppose, evolve over time as well. We held a Housing Hive back in April, which was on website rebuild versus refresh, and which is most appropriate at any one time. Now, like any product in reality, but especially digital in the sort of tech space, a website has a lifespan. Much as I bought a new iPhone, what feels like fairly recently, iPhone 13, and we've just seen one of my colleagues bring out his iPhone 14, so already mine's out of date. It's very similar website as well. There's a line on the screen around from Orbit Media Studios that was being the average lifespan of a website being 2 years and 7 months, which is quite surprisingly short when you think about it. That gives you a bit of a, I suppose, basic guidance that was based upon a specific industry. So it isn't necessarily a hard and fast rule for all organizations, but I guess the real answer is around that the lifespan of a website can vary by industry, by company, and several factors will sort of determine how quickly that individual organization should refresh it. I guess around what technology that it's using, what's the lifespan of that particular version, is that technology suiting you now compared with when you bought it and installed it originally? What about the audience? Has their needs evolved over time in terms of how they engage and what they expect? Has web performance declined in terms of traffic and conversions? Does look and feel still sort of meet what you need at any one time? And is it in line with, I suppose, peers in the sector or even some sort of competition in some ways? So I would say probably on average for what we experience, it's probably between 2 to 4 years, depending upon when you have that introduced. It might be that you just launched a platform with a new version coming out quite soon, and that sort of has an impact on longevity generally. You might have long internal sort of processes and sign-off points, which takes time to get something launched, and therefore when it is launched, it's a little bit out of date. So I guess going back to the original statement of 2 years, 7 months, appropriate for some scenarios, but it very, very sort of wildly varies at the same time. When we did speak about this in terms of rebuild versus refresh, we touched upon which is most appropriate. And we showed this to display in a bit more of a visual manner, the sort of the flow chart, and in terms of if we think of two different reasons to change this being preferences versus concerns, two very, very different things. So if you have things like internal preferences from stakeholders to update visual factors, you might want to tweak some of the design on the front end to make some small brand updates. Maybe that would be a bit of a refresh. But if we took down the sort of the right hand side column, in that if there's concerns from a security point of view, maybe your CMS is a little bit out of date and there's no longer being launched sort of security patches or updates, which opens up security risks, that would be sort of defined as a bit of a concern, and maybe that implementation of a new CMS platform could be something to think about. If you've joined us today and you're a current Prodo client or someone we speak with quite regularly, you'll be very familiar with the fact that Umbraco is launching a version of its CMS which is upgradable, and certain older versions are becoming end of life as well, which I'll come on to in a bit more detail shortly. Yeah, if we think about the differences between rebuild, refresh, the rebuild option or implementing a new CMS would be concerns around security, configuration, and sorts of things where it might need replacing and updating. But to replace the platform with something, replace a website platform with something that's going to last, is going to take time, it's going to take effort and also investment as well. So I suppose the question would be, how can you be sure that it's going to pay off, I suppose, quite quickly and give you the longevity that you need as well? Essentially, what's really important at this stage is an exercise to plan ahead. You need to be doing your own technology due diligence around working out which solutions are there, going to be fit for purpose or secure in certain scenarios. As we sort of said at the start, as housing associations, you're capturing customer data and need that sort of security in place. It needs to be extendable. So as customer needs evolve over time, as digital transformation progresses, and as your association from a housing point of view changes, you need to be able to sort of pivot and make sure that the solution can be amended and extended over time. And also going back to that point around CMS versioning, being able to upgrade that solution through time is going to give you that longevity potential that you're looking for. It goes without saying really that the chance of these implementations going successfully is increased hugely when selecting a well-established and trusted partner. And in that sort of planning ahead discovery phase, it needs to be based upon I suppose the output being picking a platform and client or customer around your requirements, which should be based upon internal discovery, external discovery, and then that brief sort of being built around what you actually need going forwards. So how would you actually go about selecting the right CMS? For instance, if we are talking about CMSs, where would you start? There's between 1,000 and 2,000 products on the market, which is sort of an estimation. Lots of them have different purposes, different reasons. Lots of them are sort of suitable for certain industries versus others. We talk about WordPress quite a lot, having a large market share of the internet generally, but it's got its place, but it's only specific for or relevant for certain scenarios, I suppose. But yeah, when we talk about social housing, again, collecting that personal data, having a website there to serve customers, to hopefully give them what they're looking for and not have to pick up the phone for routine inquiries. We should be probably thinking away from the most cheapest, most basic, quickest solution. It needs to form part of a wider digital strategy to sort of tick those boxes, which we mentioned a little bit earlier on. So a couple of stats, I suppose, to support the importance of it. So we found that 33% of marketing budgets go towards technology, and CMS sort of falling into that. So it's, as I say, it's going to be quite an investment in terms of getting this right. 34% of the web is actually powered by WordPress, but 70% of those websites have potentially vulnerabilities for hackers and I guess general sort of cybersecurity. With it being fully open source with no proprietary core, it can leave you open a little bit. So this is what I want to talk to you a little bit about today, really. This is where something like Umbraco CMS can come in. Now, it's a platform which we've used for all of our housing association website builds over the years, whether that be publicly accessible website for everyone to access, whether it be a customer portal with integrations or digital applications portal. We've done some intranets and things in the past as well. So I guess going back to those tick boxes from earlier, it meets the need in terms of being a relevant sort of framework in terms of it's built on Microsoft's .NET framework. So we know it's of high quality and sort of well respected. It is not quite as widely used as something like WordPress, but it's still very, very widely used and with some really, really big names and quite popular in this sector as well. It is open source, which means that from our perspective at Prodo, we can We can tailor things, we can design things and build things very specific to what you're looking to do, and any agency using Umbraco is the same. But it has that sort of centralized proprietary core of Umbraco HQ launching security patches and updates and new versions and these sorts of things as well, which makes it quite unique and scalable as well, which is the next point. Being open source, it's license free. But the main point for this section really is that in the past, and you'll be familiar with this if you have an Umbraco CMS website or have done in the past, or maybe work with us at some point, moving between major versions of the CMS product as it's released, because the product changed so much, it's essentially a new CMS, and there's therefore, there's no button we can click to upgrade it from one version to the next. It's essentially taking the content, taking the designs and rebuilding the back end pretty much from scratch. But now from version 9 onwards, we're up to version 10 now that we're using internally. There is a clearer upgrade path essentially between version to version, which means that going back to not having to go through a procurement exercise and, in-depth discovery every year or every 2 years, we can implement an Umbraco 10 website, for instance, and the path to upgrade it looks something like this, which is every 6 months there'll be some sort of update. When there is a major version updated, we can upgrade to it rather than having to go away and rebuild it, and another large upfront investment. It lets us maintain things a little bit closer as well as those incremental versions are updated. And generally, going back to the point on the title slide earlier, in terms of longevity in digital and making the most of an investment, is going to deliver a product for you in a website which lasts a little bit longer than it would have done before. And this is the case with a lot of CMSs out there. If it's WordPress, if it's Drupal, if it's Umbraco in the past, moving through versions is quite an onerous task and rebuilding things with investments. But now it's a case of, okay, let's implement this once and make sure we maintain it and update it as those things are released. So longevity is something which is becoming or is now one of the main selling points of Umbraco, and one of the main benefits, I suppose. It is a housing sector favorite. As I say, we've worked in the housing space for 20 years, and every website we've delivered in that time has been using Umbraco. So there's a couple of fairly recent deliverable projects that we've run in the past from this year from housing associations that you may be familiar with. But yeah, at this point, I thought I'd ask you a question, Liv, in terms of you're very, very close to a lot of our Prodo customers and the sector generally. What's the thoughts been like at the moment in terms of talking about rebuilds, talking about implementing, products for longevity? Any thoughts from you from that respect?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously, especially for our clients who are sat on version 7 of Umbraco, version 7 becomes end of life in September 2023. So we're not that far away from that point. We're already in a security only phase for them. So there's no new features being released since July of last year, I believe. So we're talking to those clients about what the future looks like for them. Our aim for them and them internally is to have the most secure and performant platform. And for most of them, that looks like a rebuild on the latest version 10. What we're doing is to work with them to map out what the risks and benefits are. We're helping them with their business cases, because with this, version of Umbraco that is able to be upgraded, we are talking about a kind of investment that's going to be a much more longer term fix for them. And also it means that their budget moving forward can be more heavily focused on new features and new releases and exciting things, as opposed to having to rebuild from the ground up, which is can be a big task and take a lot of internal resource. So it's a really exciting time for a lot of them, but we are planning on those rebuild conversations, and also what do we do to get ready for that, whether we're doing insights projects or looking at their data and their analytics to get that in a place where we are building a customer website is built on the foundation of their knowledge of the customer, but also data-led decisions as opposed to opinion-based decisions, which has been a thing that has been done in the past. So yeah, it's a really exciting time.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the what would you say obviously a lot of this has been driven by conversations that we're having in terms of trying to be a good supplier by saying that there is a product which maybe could last you a little bit longer. What's been the driver from a housing association point of view, from your experience? Is it concerns with ongoing security? Is it making use of budgets for a longer period of time, or is anything on that, do you think, that you've got?
I think it's probably a bit mix of everything, but security is a major factor. With the industry and the things we've seen happening recently regarding cybersecurity, especially, it's so important for us to be on the front foot in terms of getting one step ahead of, going into after September 2023 with a platform which will be inevitably exposed to vulnerabilities at some point, because there is vulnerabilities to be taken advantage of, and no patches will be released to kind of fix those or plug those gaps, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of those as well, isn't it? Where I suppose you kind of think in some scenarios, why would cyber attackers choose a housing association? Because there might be higher profile things out there, but I think there's probably an opinion of partially the housing sector being a little bit behind some industries in terms of digital transformation, but also that going back to that sort of customer data point of view as well. So it's and there's been recently, hasn't there, there's been some fairly high profile incidents that I'm sure everyone on the call here is aware of today, which I suppose does put a little bit more emphasis on that security point of view, I would have thought.
Yeah, and I think there's a conversation there. There's the angle, can we afford to do it? But then there's the angle, can we afford not to do it? I think it's a real balance there that we're supporting clients with the information of what are the risks, because that is the key selling point, especially to probably to board level as well. Yeah. Because obviously a website is a investment, but it's now looking like a longer term investment, which is beneficial.
Yeah, great stuff. If anyone's got any questions on that or anything around that, they'd like to join us on the conversation, feel free to put that into the chat pane. We've read any so far, Liv? No?
No, not yet.
Okay, feel free to do so, guys, if you're interested in having a chat about that. Be happy to. Yeah, I suppose moving on to the next point, which I know the title today was longevity, which we kind of covered in some ways today, but also sustainability as well. Now this is more from an infrastructure-based angle, from an infrastructure point of view. So obviously I touched upon this at the start, but the main driver behind net zero carbon in housing by 2050 is obviously going to be efficiencies in the properties themselves. And I know there's a target for EPC C ratings by 2030 as well, but you can actually impact this in your digital estate somewhat as well. So there's been research done by Kinster, which found that 2% of global carbon emissions come from electricity that powers the internet. We think of electricity just being something that we can't, isn't tangible and sort of in the cloud and we can't touch it, but it's always powered by some sort of electricity. And that's going to be growing by 1.5% over the next 10 years to 3.5% of global carbon emissions as well. So I suppose it's about what can we do to help this, I guess. The average sort of website of 10,000 page views a month, each sort of web page loading would produce 6.8 grams of CO2, which sounds really, really small. But you can imagine the amount of web pages out there and the amount of browsers the amount of web browsers that are out there in terms of users, that really sort of does add up. So I guess what can we do about this? There's three simple principles to think about here, which is that firstly, we can't manage things that we can't measure. We know that data transfer consumes electricity, so reducing that data transfer between browser and server and sort of similar scenarios, that's going to reduce emissions and energy utilization generally. But also generally sort of renewable energy we know produces far fewer emissions than other sources. So what can we do about this generally? And I mean we, by us as a group, everyone here today and in the sector generally, rather than just us, it's everyone still trying to continually drive digital forwards, but also sort of has one eye on the carbon emissions side of things as well. There's three things, I guess, to think about and prioritize. The first step would be benchmarking where website or digital generally carbon emissions stand, and then be able to make some amendments or put a bit of a roadmap in place to sort of rectify that. Second point would be going back to reducing data transfer by simply reducing page weight on the website itself and generally sort of unnecessary page views and things as well. And the last one may be a little bit more difficult to implement, or it depends, I suppose, where you are on your digital transformation journey, but will be switching to a carbon neutral website hosting service as well. So just wanted to start on the first one in a little bit more detail. Now, in the past, it's been really difficult to assess or quantify this particular aspect, but there's now a really, really popular tool out there. Some of you may have used it already, which is websitecarbon.com. So all you do is paste your URL in there. You'll get a readout of how that site performs from a carbon production perspective. Get my words out. You can see here we ran one of our recent website launches for Stockport Homes through this year, and the result is really good compared with some others out there. So I'd encourage you to go and sort of run your websites through it and see how it scores, and then if you need some sort of assistance on how you might be able to go put a roadmap in place to rectify some of that, be happy to advise that as well.
I think,
the next point would be, go on, Liv.
I think just to add on that one, stop to putting into kind of a quantity that we can all understand, is that for every month Stockport is the equivalent of 3,000 cups of tea. Now, one of the other sites that we've looked at, one of them had as much as 24,000 cups of tea. So, you know, I like to relate everything back to a cup of tea, but that's really, like, if you visualize that, it's absolutely like mind-blowing, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Similar to the amount of tea you drink, I assume, your Yorkshire tea bags.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for that, Liv. The next point on this one was reducing data transfer, which we touched upon a little bit earlier. Now, reducing this between browser and server will enable the site to load quicker, but also use less energy overall. So lightening that page rate should be a focus, and there's lots of things we can do to support this. From our perspective as a website developer, we can write clean and efficient code when it actually executes. We can recommend using things like vector graphics and utilize CSS code to load imagery over just plonking really large JPEG or even GIF files on there as well. We can suggest using scaled imagery to fit what you need, rather than just, again, adding a very large image file. And something like Umbraco or even WordPress in some scenarios can help with sort of auto cropping depending upon what version you have. We can reduce the use of unnecessary scripts, which will obviously take time to load when the user sort of loads up that website. We can do just things, and quite simple things like making sure that autoplay videos on, just playing when someone lands and they actually load in the file when they want to watch it. We can use things like quite clever tactics around caching, which means that the browser itself doesn't need to load every single web file from the server each and every time a user visits. Maybe reloads a few and sort of holds some back in the cache. So there's a few things we can do to reduce data transfer. Some of it's content based, some of it's more website configuration. But again, yeah, any advice or any sort of guidance on this, feel free to ask the question. We can give you some assistance. And then lastly, the hosting provider itself. So websitecarbon.com, again, going back to point one, will tell you if the website is powered by sustainable energy or if it isn't. Whilst this, I suppose, isn't directly within your control unless you host sort of on premise, which I know some organizations do, choosing a partner or an agency partner of some scenario which has sustainable hosting offer is absolutely in your control. We, from our perspective, we migrated all of our websites through to Azure sometime maybe last year or so, I think, which obviously being from Microsoft, Azure has been carbon neutral since 2021 and is committed to carbon negative by 2030 as well. So that sort of concludes, I suppose, the slides. And for a lot of this, there's a couple of things to talk about before you go today about the next one. But yeah, at this point, was there any questions from anyone in the chat pane, or anyone want to come off mute to have a bit of an open conversation at all? Anything in there, Liv, you can see?
James Hunter said that it's 10,756 cups of tea for his website.
There you go. That's quite a lot of tea, James. Yeah, again, that may be, using that calculator, you'll see on there whether it is related to hosting provider or if it's something like, content or files on the website itself. So that Stockport example is the fact that it's hosted in Azure, so it's running on green energy or sustainable energy, I should say. Also, the content on those pages is actually quite light as well, so that's why it scores quite highly. That's good to hear. Interesting that you've gone away to use it straight away. Any others, Liv? No?
Sorry, is this, because I've never thought about, as you said, it's intangible, right? It obviously just runs all the time. But is this a conversation others are having, that they're sort of the carbon impact of their websites? I've not had pressure or discussions about it. I'd just be interested.
Yeah, it's something we're hearing a little bit more about at the moment. To be honest, it's something that that I've not myself sort of explored much until probably earlier on this year, and discovered that website carbon calculator as well. And then we started to sort of use that when we were going away and building websites to make sure that we can either advise the client on how to position content or use files, or even make sure that the code is actually executing efficiently. But yeah, I know it does seem like a strange thing to think about, doesn't it, in terms of website carbon emissions, with your houses that you manage and look after and repair and things. But yeah, I think it's something which we're hearing a little bit more about at the moment. So yeah, it's an interesting one. But is that something that you think you might be maybe put on the agenda going forwards, James, to sort of consider how you might be able to improve that generally? Or I know there's probably a lot of other things on the agenda at the same point at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be maybe not the top three, but I think it's a good, if we're pushing everyone to be digital and self-serve, then I think it might be a quite nice mix with our comm strategy to add a little bit to it, a bit more as well. Obviously, there's the obvious, there's paper and all the rest of it, but no, not something I thought about. But yeah, I think I've recently it to our web guy who runs it. So
great stuff. Any other questions at all we can help with? Nothing in there, Liv, no?
No, just a thank you from Simon. He needs to head off.
Okay, no worries. Simon, thanks for joining as well. Okay, in that case, well, there's just a couple of things just to run by before you leave today. Two things, actually. So the first one is that we want to make sure that these housing hives are benefiting you guys in whatever way that we can. Obviously, sometimes we talk about things that we can help with, like today. Sometimes we want to make sure that we're connecting people to discuss certain things that sort of burning issues or challenges which are happening in the space at a particular time as well. So we're going to pop a link to the survey into the chat pane because we want the next one to be focused on generally cost of living crisis. But we want to sort of base that agenda around feedback from people that we know in the sector, like you guys and our customer base and other people as well. So if you wouldn't mind, it'd be great if you could fill in that very, very short survey, which is just, contact details and a single question. And then what we can do then is make sure that we select certain panelists from around the sector. We might even ask some of you guys on today to join us. But then we can go away and make sure that the agenda and the questions that we look to answer with those housing professionals on the call is beneficial for you as well. So I really appreciate it if you wouldn't mind filling that survey. That would be super helpful. The next one will be 10th of November as well. I suppose as a thank you for joining us today, contributing to the survey and sort of generally sort of engaging with us. We want to offer you a free sort of web audit of your current website. So me and the team will run a few tests on the website. If you get in touch via that contact form, put your URL in there, and we'll run a few tests, and I'll get back to you with a personalized video of certain things that maybe you're scoring quite well on at the moment, and certain things you could maybe improve upon as well. That might include carbon. It might include a website carbon calculator as well. So yeah, please feel free to fill in that form. We'll pop the link into the chat pane for that as well, and yeah, we'll get back to you with some videos or even have an open chat on a Zoom call, something similar. So yeah, I suppose thanks very much for your time, everyone. It's hopefully you gained something from today, and it was a topic which was of interest. But yeah, as I say, the next one will be generally sort of responding to the cost of living crisis on the 10th of November. So yeah, we want to make sure that we cover the right sort of aspects of that. So we'll be in touch with some of you to join us for panelists, and yeah, we'll look to gain your insights from the survey results as well. But we'll follow up after this with the follow-up email with the recording, but also link to the survey and a few other things, and invite to the next one. So thanks again for your time, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you on the 10th.